Okay, so last week we discussed the first night vision. There's 8 of them. They come in succession, and the first one was the riders on the horse. There's a captain, and then I call him a captain, and obviously it's implied there's a leader and men on horses behind him. So there's a rider on a horse, other riders behind him. They're in a ravine that's covered by around myrtle trees, kind of like they're in cover. And they have patrolled the earth and found it quiet and peaceful, as opposed to Israel that's in distress and in hardship as they're trying to build the temple. So that was the first night vision. Then it goes into the second one. And then he also gives them some exhortation and explains a little bit about that first vision. But then he goes into the second, okay? Now the second night vision is 4 horns. It starts at the 18th verse of the first chapter. The second vision does. And it says, Zechariah says, I looked and I behold, and there were 4 horns. So he sees 4 horns. Now, these horns are not like trumpets, right? Or that kind of horn. They're animal horns. In the Bible, not always, but often, there is a pattern of when horns are used, it talks about power or authority. For instance, in Daniel, it talks about a goat and his horn, and he's fighting this other animal, which I believe is a ram, and it shows his horn gets broke off. That's his power. That's his authority. Often when even like if you read the Psalms, sometimes it talks about he's my horn. In other words, he's your authority, your power, right? It's a way to describe it. It's an animal horn, and it describes someone's power or authority. So he sees 4 horns, 4 different horns, and he asks the angel, what are these? And the angel replies and says, these 4 horns are 4 different nations that have downtrodden Israel so that no man can lift up their head. Okay, so these 4 horns represent 4 different nations. We'll get into who they might be in a minute, but we know that they're nations. These aren't people. They're not figurative. This is not some kind of, well, it is a figure of speech, as it, these horns represent the nations, but these are not people or some concepts. They're of what we don't know what he's talking about. We do know what he's talking about because he says these 4 horns are nations, right? So they have downtrodden Israel and put them in distress, and no one can lift up their head. What does it mean when you can't lift up your head? You're downtrodden. You have a broken spirit. You've been you're broken, and these nations were used by God to bring punishment. But so often a biblical pattern is the nations that God uses to punish his people, Israel, they go too far, and they themselves are often, most of the time, completely wiped out. There is no Babylon, and there is no Medo-Persia. Greece is around, but it doesn't have any power, and it wasn't the Greece that it was at the time. And so the horns have come, so these are the 4 horns. And then, so Zechariah sees the 4 horns. It's explained to him what they are and what they've done to Israel. And then Zechariah sees 4 technicians that are coming. Technicians, artisans, or craftsmen is probably a better word for it. Craftsman. So and looking this word up, that it has the idea of a metalsmith, an artisan, like a metal working smith, like an ironsmith, but a metalsmith. And these 4 metalsmiths, or craftsmen, if you will, have come to terrify the nations and to cast them down, to bring judgment, in other words. And these 4 technicians are probably other nations that are being used to bring judgment and terrify them and to cast them down, as the angel told Zechariah, these horns. So whatever they are, likely another nation, other nations that are bringing judgment to these horns that have lifted up themselves and downtrodden Israel. But whatever it is, it's some form of agency of judgment that God is using to bring judgment on these horns, these nations that have downtrodden Israel and broke their spirit. And they probably are other nations. So 4 horns, he sees 4 horns. These are the 4 horns that have downtrodden Israel and have and have distressed them to the point that no Israelite lifts up their head. And then he sees 4 horns. Again, I'm Derek. This is Bible Journey. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. And we will see you next time.